Thinking about this morning, and it's one of the most important things for people that that are visiting the ocean, that come down here as tourists and everything like that. Two things is you got to understand that the ocean is not a pool. You do not treat the ocean like you treat your swimming pool. Um, that is the biggest mistake that I see a lot of people making down here. Like I see parents that don't really watch their kids and notice like that they'll their kids are, like when you first start out in the pool, a lot of times what kids are doing is they're dropping down to the pool, pushing down, and then pushing up to get back up to the surface, and then they go back down again to push off. They do that technique and little doggy paddle, and I'm like, that's not going to work in the ocean for the long time, for the long run. And always keep an eye on your kids, because a lot of times, my lifeguarding and how I make all those saves is because I'm observing. And it is sad because something could go down right in front of me and I would never even notice. Even me, as much as I watch the water and I catch these things a lot of times, something could happen with anyone, any age. And that's a little bit frightening for me. But a lot of things that I observe when I'm watching the water is that nobody is really watching your kids a lot of times. When people are in the water and there's a lot of commotion going on, most people are only watching themselves. So that is a little bit of a scary thing. Like sometimes I see kids, no parents are watching, they're drifting down the beach in the side current, and they get out like I mean, I know I used to do the same thing, and my parents probably let me do the same thing back in the day, assuming that somebody's watching me at all times, but that's not true. I see it all the time. And the second thing is, one of the things that bothers me a lot is when they have the kids yelling for help. That is something that, it's like a cry wolf thing. Because with me, so many rescues have been like my intense ones where, somebody could possibly drown out there, is I have a person screaming, help me, help me, help me. Right? So when you have your kid in the water, that's a very common response, is they even yell it. And sometimes they don't need help, right? But then sometimes they do look like they're in a little trouble, and I'm like all like getting jumpy and being like, okay, when's the parent gonna step in? Like I had an incident like this around that time when I was having all the rescues and everything like that. I noticed one kid just kept screaming to the mom, and she was getting pulled away, and I'm like, I had to run up to the mom and I say, yo, grab your kid. They can't be screaming out here saying, help me. And like, yeah, this kid was actually getting pulled out. Not a good swimmer at all. Like the mom couldn't swim. Like if they were caught in those rip currents, like they weren't going to make it out. And that's where they were. They were in that area where, I was already on edge for what I was dealing with. I'm like, and then, I'm dealing with that as well. So, yeah, it gets a little stressful being down there. I know that this isn't going to last though. Riptides. It's a little weird because now we're going on the backside of the slope of the high tide. Now it's not pulling out so much, but there could be some tidal fluctuation for when the lifeguards go off duty today. As far as like places where you were standing on a sandbar and now that sandbar disappears because of the high tide, that might be a little bit of a little bit, of something to watch out for today. Like I said, I'm not really gonna get out into that. Usually, when the tide's pulling out, I put more of a warning. But even as the tide pushes in, especially if there's a little swell out there, that can mix things up a little bit and make things tricky. With that. But with that being said, I've just been watching some of the earthquakes. Just watching the patterns, for me, I'm not like a doomsday guy or anything like that. I don't want to put out fear or anything, but like when I see these type of patterns in earthquakes generally, like when the activity is like it is, I'll usually start looking at the main areas that are just kind of prone sometimes to these type of incidents. And I guess usually if you think about tsunamis and the destructive ones that travel across the Pacific Ocean, usually you'll get an earthquake. I know Chile has a history of that area has a history of producing those kind of events. Alaska, which they just had one go off that wasn't too big of a tsunami that occurred over there. Then you got Japan and Indo, and those are generally the main areas that you watch out for when these type of events are going on. Not to say that things can't trigger. Like I know off of like the Oregon coast up near Vancouver, they usually get some around there. There's something called the Cascadia subduction zone. I think that's the name of it. And they're always waiting on the big one in Cali. They say that down the San Andreas is overdue, by a couple hundred years, and it is that most people aren't predicting a doomsday scenario like the movies. It will cause some widespread damage, definitely a lot of damage to infrastructure, but like as far as like what you see in the movies and everything like that, I don't think that that's what scientists are actually predicting. I'm sure it will cause some devastation, no doubt